My name is Dmitry Kupin. I'm Senior Malware Analyst at Group IB Threat Intelligence Department. Today, I'm going to talk about state-sponsored groups that conduct targeted attacks in many countries and which could be behind the attacks against Russian federal executive authorities. This presentation summarizes a great deal of collaborating research conducted by Anastasia Tikhonova, Head of APT Research at Group IB Threat Intelligence Department, and me. For that reason, I will use we throughout the presentation to refer to myself and Anastasia. In this presentation, we as threat intelligence ninjas will show how you can work with available data to identify threat actors and classify their malicious software. To begin, we will tell you about a few public reports that encouraged us to do this research. Next, we will focus on WEBDAV-O malware. We have found and analyzed two versions of WEBDAV-O, one for 32-bit Windows operating system and the other for 64-bit Windows. After that, we will show you how we attributed WEBDAV-O to the TASKMASTERS group. We will discuss the similarities between WEBDAV-O and Blue Traveler malware. Then, we will explain how we were able to indirectly link WEBDAV-O with the TA428 group. We will talk about the similarities between the Blue Traveler and Albaniutas malware varieties. At the end of the presentation, we will summarize the results and highlight the findings of our research. And as a bonus, we will share our thoughts about attribution of the Blue Traveler malware family to another state-sponsored group known as Lucky Mouse. The Group IB Threat Intelligence team tracks many threat actors and malware families. To avoid confusion, we use a specific set of naming conventions. Let's look at the naming scheme now, so we're on the same page. Please note that malicious programs, WEBDAV-O and Mail-O are highlighted in white because they were used by threat actors in the same targeted attacks. The links highlighted in blue reflect the essence of this research, the relationship between TASKMASTERS and TA428, as well as WEBDAV-O, Blue Traveler, and Albaniutas malware. The connections from Start Service tool are unconfirmed because we haven't yet been able to find samples of the malware to analyze, but we are still hunting for them. So where did our research start? The starting point of the research was a joint report written by experts from Solar JSOC and the National Computer Incident Response and Coordination Center, which was released in mid-May 2021. According to the report, the main target of the attackers in Russia was the federal executive authorities. Analyzing this report, we noticed that we had already seen similar tools in early targeted attacks. Unfortunately, there were no indicators of compromise in their report, so we relied on the description of the tools and screenshots. It's important to note that the report is based on the analysis of a series of targeted attacks in 2020, in which the WEBDAV-O and Mail-O tools were deployed. We immediately knew that there were a few main suspects who could potentially be responsible for the attacks. Then, in early June 2021, Sentinel Labs research about the Mail-O malware was released. In their study, experts write that Mail-O is associated with TA428 tools such as SysManager and Tmanger. Now, let's take a look at the WEBDAV-O analysis results. The specified file was compiled in July 2018 and uploaded to VirusTotal in November 2019. So, it's possible that WEBDAV-O malware has been in use since 2018. The first WEBDAV-O sample we found was a 32-bit dynamic link library that runs as a service in the system. It's worth noting that the comment on the VirusTotal to this sample from the company Positive Technologies hints at the Blue Traveler malware family connection. WEBDAV-O provides remote access to the command line shell, allows to execute various commands on the victim's computer. The control channel is implemented through Yandex.D's cloud service, using the WEBDAV protocol. The basic authentication method is used. The analyst file can work with several accounts of the Yandex disk. In our case, there were two. The RC4 algorithm is used to encrypt strings, configuration data, and contents of the command and response files in Yandex disk. The encryption key is shown on the slide. The image on the right shows the functionality of WEBDAV-O. Numbers indicate the sequence of actions of the malware. First, there is a preparation for interacting with the command and control server, namely with one of the WEBDAV-O accounts. Then the malware receives commands to execute them. The test directory contains command files, and test2 contains response files. WEBDAV-O deletes the command file after it has been executed. WEBDAV-O executes commands that allow attacker to send files to the cloud, download files from the cloud, end the session with the program, set the timeout interval between commands, and also run different commands in the command shell. The decrypted strings in WEBDAV-O look like this. Typically, the configuration data specifies the number of accounts that WEBDAV-O can work with. The accounts themselves in the form, login, colon, password. The decrypted strings contains commands, various format strings, and so on. Now let's take a look at the WEBDAV-O 64-bit sample. Please note that this file was compiled in December 2018 and uploaded to VirusTotal in June 2021. As with the first sample, this malware may have been used by threat actors as early as 2018. This version of WEBDAV-O is well documented in the Solar JSOC and the National Computer Incident Response and Coordination Center report, and has similar functionality to the previous version that we looked at earlier. Therefore, the functional capabilities of this WEBDAV-O sample are not covered here. Instead, we consider the files and directories that WEBDAV-O x64 works with. The first two files are used to test the connection. Test4.txt contains the interval between command requests, which is set in minutes. Test5.txt contains the date and time until which the malware will be inactive. Test6.txt contains the OAuth token. Interestingly, it's encrypted with RC4 with the key from the previous version of WEBDAV-O. Test7.txt contains the RC4 session key encrypted with the RSA public key. Test directory contains command files, and test2 contains response files. The decrypted strings also indicate the number of accounts which the malware can operate with. The account is set as basic token. It means that string like login, colon, password encoded in base64. You can also find an OAuth token here. The data is hidden because we don't know whether Yandex has blocked access to the specified account or not. This slide provides a comparison table of the two versions of WEBDAV-O malware that we detected. All differences are highlighted in bold white. The difference is in authentication and the number of accounts. Sleep until command and output format string were added to WEBDAV-O x64. This command is responsible for the time until which the WEBDAV-O malware is inactive. The 64-bit version uses small file objects in the Yandex disk cloud. Also in this version, the RC4 session key is used to encrypt the contents of command and response files. So, how are WEBDAV-O and the TASKMASTERS group related? Let's talk about the relationship between WEBDAV-O and the TASKMASTERS group. As you may know, TASKMASTERS, also known as Blue Traveler, is a state-sponsored hacker group that allegedly have been active since at least 2010. The group attacks companies based in several countries, but many of their targets are in Russia and Commonwealth of Independent States. The hackers target solid industrial and energy enterprises, government agencies, and transport companies. based on a large database of analyzed malicious files collected during our research, as well as during incident response to cyber threats. We linked a WEBDAV-O x86 sample with a Blue Traveler Trojan. Now a comparison between the WEBDAV-O x86 sample and the Blue Traveler sample is shown here. The file netue4.dll is a dynamic link library that runs as a service. This sample is a remote access Trojan, which can upload or download files from the command and control server and execute commands on victim machine. This slide shows a code snippets of the upload command verification. Conceptually, the code fragments are similar, but visually they are different, which may be caused by some features of the compiler. The code fragments of the download command verification is highly similar. You can only see difference on the first slide. We also see the similarity of the code of verification, the quit and exit commands in the case of Blue Traveler. And we see the similarity in running commands in the command line shell CMD. Now let's compare the password generation technique. In our case, passwords to the accounts in the body of the WEBDAV-O x86 malware. According to a report on TASKMASTERS group from Positive Technologies, the group uses a diagonal method for setting a password. The sequences of 4 characters are taken only the register, and the combination of these rows are changed. As you can see from this picture, the method of generating passwords is the same. Let's draw a few points to summarize WEBDAV-O attribution to taskmasters, the similarity of the program code, similar commands and file, and the same manner of creating passwords. Thus, it can be assumed that WEBDAV-O is a subset of the Blue Traveler malware family. Now let's talk about the attribution to the TA428 group. TA428 group is a state-sponsored hacker group that has been operating since 2013. The attackers target several government agencies in East Asia that control governmental information technology, domestic and foreign policy, and economic development. As you remember, malicious programs WEBDAV-O and Mail-O were described in the report of Solar JSOC and the National Computer Incident Response and Coordination Center. We have identified the connections of WEBDAV-O with the Blue Traveler malware family. And now we will show how WEBDAV-O relates to the tools of the TA428 group through a comparison of samples from Blue Traveler and Albaniutas. It all started with the Mail-O downloader. There are indeed overlaps between Mail-O, S-Manager, and Tmanga in the code of the expert function entry, which brings us to the TA428 group. We suppose that threat actors made a mistake in the name of this expert function, and it could be entry. But it's interesting that malware called Albaniutas also has an entry expert function. In terms of attribution, we are interested in Albaniutas. The Japanese company Entity Security presented technical reports on each of the tools of TA428 group in 2020. Let's compare 2 types of malware from the Blue Traveler family and the other from Albaniutas. To do this, we take the files highlighted in white on this slide. We have found an overlap between the Albaniutas component and the tool used to run the Blue Traveler DLL by the Taskmasters group. In Blue Traveler case, it was a standalone utility that was used to register and run a DLL as a service in the system. And in Albaniutas, it was a separate library responsible for the same actions. This slide shows the similar code fragments of these 2 programs. Note that They use the same debugging lines as well as the same string decryption function with XOR algorithm. In this code snippet, pay attention to the approach of forming the library name, or rather its copy, which will be registered and launched as a service. Now let's take a look at the Trojans Blue Traveler and Albaniutis, a fileless payload module. Recall that we previously compared the above Blue Traveler sample with WEBDAV-O x86. So let's consider examples of similar code fragments that these malicious programs share. This slide shows the code snippets for running some commands in CMD. In Albaniutis' case, the name of created process is encrypted with RC4. As you can see, the code fragments are not identical, but functionally they are very similar. Here are the code fragments for processing received data from the command and control server. In both cases, the separator is searched for using this ster function, and then the data is parsed according to the given separator with the strtalk function by 3 times. Albaniutis has similar command validation mechanism to Blue Traveler. Also, the same command names are used in these code fragments, but as you can see, the debug strings have changed. The analyzed Blue Traveler and Albaniutis samples have the following similar commands: exit, download, upload, and execute some command in CMD. Let's look at the format Blue Traveler and Albaniutis network requests. Here, for clarity, we used another Blue Traveler sample. Note that network requests have similar patterns: directory with a hard-coded name, directory with a random name, it's a system time on a victim machine, and another directory with a random name, it's a size of encoded data with base 64. We also have found that the RC4 encryption key was used in Albaniutis, as in the sample of the Blue Traveler server part from the Positives Technologies report. Let's recap a few main points about the link between Blue Traveler and TA428. The malloc downloader is associated with TA428, the connection of Albaniutis components and Blue Traveler files, also similarity of the program code, highly similar network interaction, the same commands, and the encryption key. So, what have we learned? What conclusions can be drawn? Bringing all the previous findings together, let's summarize the results of our research. WEBDAV-O is another version of the Blue Traveler malware family, and the TASKMASTERS group may be using it. It's quite possible that TA428 and TASKMASTERS acted in different attacks on Russian federal authorities. Malware is linked with TA428 instruments via the expert function entry. TA428 uses the Albaniutis malware, which is a new version of Blue Traveler, or in other words, its continuation. Thus, it can be assumed that WEBDAV-O is also related to the TA428 group. As we know, threat actors often exchange their tools and infrastructure. Perhaps, in this case, it was so. No less weighty is the possibility that there is one large hacker group, which consists of several divisions. These are main findings, but there is one more important to bear in mind. As an addition to this research, we would like to share our thoughts on the connection with another threat actor, Lucky Mouse, also known as APT27. The group has been active since at least 2010, primarily targeting organizations in the Asia-Pacific region, and since 2013, it has attacked high-tech companies in the United States. This group is known to target the aerospace, government, defense, technology, energy, and manufacturing sectors. There is evidence that Lucky Mouse is collaborating with the TA-428 group. Avast released a report describing the operation of the Lucky Mouse group in December 2020. A new Lucky Mouse campaign targeted government agencies and the National Data Center of Mongolia. It's interesting that after reading this report, it becomes clear that Blue Traveler is Albaniutas from the report of the Japanese company Entity Security. In addition, the report describes the Service Installer tool, which is a TASKMASTERS utility for running a library as a service in the system. Moreover, Lucky Bag is nothing more than Timangar malware. As you may know, the Operation Stealthy Trident described by ESET also targeted government agencies in Mongolia. Lucky Mouse and TA-428 could stand behind this campaign. But the most interesting finding of the Avast report was the Start Service Tool malware. The payload file of Start Service Tool is implemented in the Go language and utilizes the Dropbox cloud service as a command and control server. The program uses RC4 and base64 algorithms. If you look at the flowchart from the Avast report, there is a link to WEBDAV-O, which are colored in blue blocks. Similar techniques are used in Start Service Tool, cloud infrastructure, validation routine, same directories, and logic as in WEBDAV-O. Test directory contains command files, and test2 contains response files. All these files are encrypted with RC4 algorithm. The command file is deleted from the cloud after command execution. Note that the command set download, upload, sleep, execute, and quit is similar to Blue Traveler and WEBDAV-O. To sum up, we can assume that Start Service Tool also belongs to the Blue Traveler malware family. In addition, this malware, similar to WEBDAV-O, Lucky Mouse could act in conjunction with TA-428, as in the previous attack called Operation Stealthy Trident. Here you can see the links to the sources that were used in our research. So you may ask, what's the impact of this research? What's the point for my organization, my business? And why is it important? As Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you needn't fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. In other words, it's very important to understand the capabilities of the attackers in order to build a competent defense scenario for the blue team. Thanks a lot.